marks the 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. The nation's growth has been evident in every aspect and every step of the way. Feeling these changes the most are perhaps its people, especially those who were born the same year as the PRC. Jin Liqun, the president of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, is one of them. I ask him about his childhood, his career path, his lifelong pursuit, and how they mirror the rise of his country. President Jin, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
I guess age is no secret in this interview. We know that you were born just ahead of the National Day. What are some of the childhood memories you still recall today that are also important moments for the young nation?
I still remember the days we were in elementary schools, and a high school, and we got the education about not just math, or language or whatever. I think the most important education is how to be a Chinese boy or Chinese girl who were brought up in New China, and what we are supposed to do to contribute to the rejuvenation of the country. And we were also, I think, inculcated upon by the teachers, by our parents. We are in duty bound to study hard, to work hard, to make China a great country.
And apparently you've always been the hardworking one. You have this passion for reading, and people familiar with you say that you always lose no time in reading. The passion for reading, does it have to do with your upbringing?
My parents are workers, and I'm from a working class family. But I think probably a little bit different from the other families. Both my father and my mother love to read. And my father is well versed in the Chinese classics history. And he's a great calligrapher. He writes beautiful handwriting. My mother also, self-taught. And they both can read Chinese classics in the original. So I love to learn, to read, and as I said, our generation were brimmed with enthusiasm and fired with aspirations for building China into a modern, advanced country. In the 1950s and the early 60s, we were still very young, and as you know, in the formative years of any child, anybody, it's very much important to have your values developed, to know what is right, what is wrong, and to understand the meaning of your life and the way you spend your time. I think this kind of education is very much important. It's part of the most productive course in the curriculum of our education.
Well, apparently language and literature have been your lifelong passion. We know that you are equally comfortable quoting Chinese poets as English and French intellectuals in their original languages. English was your major back in college. And how do such interests shape your initial understanding of the world?
Whatever we do in our career, I think the training of humanities is very important. But later on, I developed new areas in my studies and finance, economics, but also the humanities helped. For instance, in our job, we have to communicate with the people of the rest of the world. How to communicate? How do you communicate with the people in a way that would make your comments acceptable? how can you formulate your narratives which will be constructive rather than destructive? And all this, in my view, is very much important. For instance, in our institution, we are still very small, 8.5 years into operation, pretty small, and we were certainly going to be developing into a bigger institution. But even now, we have 68 nationalities. On a daily basis, we deal with people from different backgrounds. They speak different languages from different families of different faith and different kind of education, doing different kind of a job. How could we work together as a team? Mutual understanding, mutual respect, mutual trust. And how you do that as the leader of this institution? How can you do that without understanding the people with different cultural background?
Sure. Cross-cultural communication is the key in running an institution like this. And also, we know that you spent some early years working in the countryside, and reading was your companion back then. And you once said it was a character-building experience. What did you learn?
I spent a good 10 years in rural China, in the southern part of China, which is certainly very tough, working and growing rice in the paddy fields is no cakewalk. It's never a fairground entertainment. It's really tough. Can you imagine? We were working in the paddy fields with the water as hot as more than 40 degrees, with the sun, scorching sun, pelting its heat on you, and you have to do this with the farmers from morning till night. It's really tough. It's also, in my view, to help you to understand how you would deal with the way life, treats you. I think it makes or breaks. For me and for quite a number of people of my generation, we went through these tough years learning from the peasants, rural people. And I think I mingle with them and I work with them every day, and I share their feelings, their aspirations, their hopes and wishes and dreams. And I know from those years what we should do to improve the livelihood of the people on the grassroots level. It's very much important. And also I feel the warmth of the peasants' care about me. Somebody who from urban areas never went through this kind of farm work, and they helped me, they trusted me. So I think the good 10 years is really very much important. Of course, I didn't spend all of this time in the on the farmland. I also did a lot of other work, and in particular rural enterprise business, right? Developing rural industry. And also I taught in the elementary and high schools to the kids of the rural people. I went back decades later to visit them, and I'm very pleased to see after 40 years of reform opening up, their livelihood has been greatly enhanced.
You mentioned the reform and opening up policy. It was certainly a turning point for China and for you as well. What have been some of the biggest changes, and how would you compare China now and then?
The reform and opening up marks the turning point in the Chinese history. It's the turning point for the Chinese nation, and it's a turning point for so many individuals. And we saw the prospect of a more prosperous China. And we saw the career path which we could enjoy when we went back to college, when we back to school. So 40 years later, when we look back, I would say we all feel very proud, not just of the achievements the Chinese people have made under the leadership of the party and the government. It's also I think very important for them to understand each of us have contributed, no matter how modest. Each of us has contributed a bit to the building of a China as number 2 economy in the whole world, and in many areas Chinese science technology are already taking the lead.
You were also among the first batches of Chinese students who had the opportunity to study abroad. What was it like back then?
I was actually already working in the World Bank while taking courses in the University Economics and Finance. In those days, we understood there's a pretty big gap between China and the rest of the world, particularly developed countries in terms of science, technology, and even in finance areas. There's a big gap. So I think it's incumbent upon us, the young people, to learn things new, right? And when China was being integrated into the rest of the world economy, we need talents who could absorb the advanced technologies and new technology, new know-how to fast or accelerate the process of Chinese modernization. So I think we were really charged with the sense of responsibility. Working in the World Bank, for us, I said it's a years of apprenticeship because everything was new. And then we just started to learn and then do something so that we can speed up Chinese modernization. And it's a very rewarding period. And you see, nowadays China is helping the rest of the developing world, okay, based on our own experience, you see. So it's very much rewarding.
Rising from a worker's family, Jin Liqun seized every opportunity that came his way to make his mark on the international stage. Early on, the Chinese Finance Ministry positioned him as an official to the World Bank in Washington. This experience launched his ascent to the Asian Development Bank, becoming the first Chinese to hold the vice presidency there.
How have these diverse and multilateral experiences prepared you to become the inaugural president of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank?
I said, I am the product of reform and opening up. This is also the trust put in me by the leaders in the institutions I work, like the Ministry of Finance. They trust me, they give me the opportunity to try different kind of things, to have a responsibility for a lot of important jobs to do. So I would say I'm fortunate because I was born in China. I was brought up in China. And my country, my government and the party gave me the opportunity. In default of that, nothing like this could have happened to me. As you know, the Chinese leader proposed the initiation of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. I think this was really visionary. When 57 founding members gathered in Beijing, to sign off on the agreement, President Xi told all of them, and he said that this is almost verbatim. He said, ever since China opened up, we have had the support, first from the World Bank and then AIIB, and so many countries given us bilateral assistance. China has developed. The Chinese people are grateful. The Chinese people will never forget about that. Now that we are developed, it's our turn to offer help to the others. This bank must be run by high level of international standards.
But if we rewind the clock back a little bit, back more than 10 years ago, at the very beginning, there was a lot of suspicion over the purpose of creating an institution like this, and of course China's role in the process. But over the years, we've seen the AIIB becoming increasingly playing the role of a major player in the MDB family and gaining broader global recognition. What do you think has led to this change?
Given my responsibility of dealing with the bilateral dialogues with the United States, with UK, with Germany, and also my responsibility in participating in APEC or G20, I understood that this was certainly not an easy job to do. I was fully aware of the issues which has been lingering on the minds of those countries who are invited to join in the setting up of this institution. There were questions, suspicions, misgivings, doubts, and all kind of imagining, which would actually create huge problems for us to bring people together. And as a multilateral development bank, as an international institution, it is of vital importance to have both developed countries and developing countries to join and work together. We aim at South-South cooperation and North-South cooperation. So can you imagine if we only have a couple of countries in Asia, developing countries, poor countries, without the participation of other countries in other regions, it will be very hard for the bank to be credible, right? So we set a very high standard, we set a high bar, and of course, being a newcomer, we enjoy the advantage of learning from the other multilateral development banks. I personally perused all of the articles of agreement of other institutions. I worked in the World Bank, I worked in AIIB, on the board and in the management team. But still, I perused all of these documents to understand how a multilateral development bank could win the trust and the support of the shareholders, stakeholders, and how could we have all of the staff and the management members from different parts of the world to work as a team. But as I said, the guiding principle is there. This bank must be run as an international institution by high standards. And since we persevere in pursuing this high objective, since we stick to the basic principle that the bank is run as an international institution, we won the trust, not just the 57, but also more and more countries.
I'd like to ask you about the second word in your bank's name, infrastructure. The definition has really broadened beyond the traditional and energy and transport and expanded to what you see as the infrastructure of tomorrow. What's the picture you've envisioned?
You're starting from 1980s. When we went to work in the World Bank in the 1980s, after the change of representation in the IMF and the World Bank, we saw the infrastructure in the United States. And we also traveled to other developed countries. We saw the infrastructure and how those kind of infrastructure is doing for the economy. At that time in 1980, we didn't have any expressway. We didn't have electrified railway, to say nothing of the rapid rail. We did not have modern airports or seaports. Virtually nothing in terms of modern infrastructure. Look at what happened. After 15 years of investment in infrastructure, Chinese economy started to take off. By the year 2000, the year before, in the run-up to the year when China became a WTO member, I think we were blessed with already a modern infrastructure network. And then you see the Chinese economy took off. So our idea is, unless we help financing basic infrastructure in many low-income countries, they would have a hard time really improving the livelihood of the people. They would have a hard time reducing poverty. Infrastructure is the very foundation for modern economy. And infrastructure development paves the path for sustained development. This is what we understood. But with the evolvement of our financing and with the passage of time, we understood that infrastructure should never ever be designed, implemented in a way like what it was done 20, 30 years ago. We are building infrastructure for tomorrow, which means the infrastructure development should take into consideration the impact on the environment. Our modern infrastructure should be conducive to the improvement in the environment, reversing the environmental degradation, and our infrastructure should also help dealing with climate change. So we do a lot of climate change financing for climate adaptation, mitigation kind of thing. So also, we think infrastructure should be defined in a very broad way. For instance, when China and the many other countries were hit by COVID-19, we quickly mobilized resources to do projects which would help these countries deal with COVID-19 impact. We provide support to Beijing, Wuhan, and Chongqing. And we provide support to many other countries. You know why? Because healthcare system is important. And COVID-19 laid bare the weaknesses of the healthcare system. It's the weakest link on the chain. And then we help these countries and the people to deal with that. It's the social infrastructure. And we are also providing support for digital infrastructure. So infrastructure for tomorrow is the infrastructure to improve the resilience of the economies in our countries, which we support.
So if you were to reflect on your career path now, President Jin, what were some of the chapters or moments or achievements that have made you particularly proud?
First of all, I'm proud of China. Because China, my motherland, has given me the opportunity. And if I've done something positive, if I contributed a bit, I would feel happy that I did not waste such a great opportunity given to me. And ever since I started my career, joining the Ministry of Finance and working in the different institutions, I always keep in mind that I'm a Chinese. I should do my best, not just in the interest of China, but also to contribute to the global peace and prosperity as a Chinese national. And that is the attractiveness of the AIIB, this new institution. So I'm happy with all of the opportunities coming my way. What I can say is that I did not waste all these great opportunities. I've tried my best.
Were there things you'd have done differently with the benefit of hindsight?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm fine with my conviction that whatever we do, we should do our best.
And now, as someone who grew up with the nation and whose experiences mirror the rise of his country, what are some of the messages you'd like to share with the younger generation of talent out there who share the aspiration to become someone like you?
I think for the younger generation, they live in a very much different world as we were in the 50s, 60s. They have now extensive contacts with the outside world, and through internet all kinds of books. They know much, much more than what we could possibly to do in those days. But I would say it's very much important is to have the social values, to keep in mind we should never ever live for ourselves. We should live for other people. As a Chinese, I think when China becomes number 2 economy, we should try our very best to continue to improve the well-being of the Chinese people, but also I think it's our duty to help the people of other countries, particularly low-income countries. And this is what we need to do. And they have a bright future. They have the future ahead of them. What is most important? Cherish all the opportunities. Never waste a single minute. Working hard. My generation, as I said, we worked in rural areas for 10 years. In those days, we kept working, we kept reading, not just the books in print, but books which could never be printed. That's the book of society. That's the book of reality. That's the book which would give us the intelligence and wisdom and knowledge which could never be imparted to us by books in print. So the young people should not simply working on books, they should work in the wider world where they can learn to do what they should.
President Jin Liqun, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.